We are ready?
It's
I thought so then
it should be starting momentarily.
I
Now,
see. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Doctor's Orders. It's Friday, or as I like to call it, Friday, because we have so much fun on Doctor's Orders every single week. My name is Ruth Presley, Nutrition Boss, Love Yourself Healthy LLC, and I'm a part of a healthy living community along with our amazing transformation coach, Coach Carla, who everybody knows. I call her my personal Dr. Google. The healthy living community that I was speaking of is known as Juice Plus. Juice Plus has been around since 1993. We were the company that introduced smoke detectors in the US back in 1970. Then we went into air filtration and water filtration. And then in 1993, with a divine connection between Dr. Smokey Santillo and the Juice Plus crew, Juice Plus was born. We were just whole food, real good stuff that does the body good. And I'm going to turn it over to my good buddy, Coach Carla.
thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. I'm really excited that we can be here this evening. Thank you, my best buddy, Ruth Presley, the nutrition boss. And I would love if you guys could think of a couple questions that you'd like to ask the coach. You know, things that people may have asked you that you never got the chance to say, I mean, oh, what about this? Or it could be a question that you've asked before and you think it's important that people get the answers. So if you could write put a Q in the chat and then a short version of your question, or just put a Q in the chat so that we can bring you up in a little while and hear your question, and I'll do my best to answer it. Well, this evening, I'm Coach Carla Joy. In fact, I'm Coach Carla Joy every evening. And I'm really happy to be here. And if you know my story, you know that I got the shock of my life when I realized I was diagnosed with high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and prediabetes. Now, whether or not you know someone who has any of these um, diagnoses or has these labs, you can imagine how shocked I was since I thought I was the healthiest person I knew. But then in retrospect, I have to think I've had digestive issues, skin issues, hair issues, joint issues, all kinds of issues. And yet I thought I was healthy. But when I got those lab results, I knew I had to do something different. You know, you may have heard that if you want to have something different, you have to do something different. Because if you keep doing what you have been doing, you'll keep getting what you have been getting. So I had to make a change. I grabbed my friend, Chef Karen Carlisle, and we went with Ruth Presley, we went searching for different modalities to see if we could restore our health. Now, Ruth had already made some significant changes in her health, and one day we'll have to have her tell her story so that you'll get an idea of how dramatic the journey that she'd been on was and why it impressed me so much. But it motivated me to go on my own journey and try to find out more information about how I could change my health outcomes. You see, as a trained medical professional, I had never heard anybody get better. They sometimes their numbers got better, sometimes they felt better, but they never really got better. And so, um, fortunately for me, my goddaughter, who is now a doctor of physical therapy, introduced me to the documentary Forks Over Knives and also to the work of Dr. Michael Greger, where he does a presentation called Uprooting the Cause of Disease. And in it, he shows that changing your lifestyle, he showed the data, he showed the research, where changing your lifestyle could reduce the risk, slow the progress of, and in many cases reverse the 15 most common causes of death listed by the CDC. So that was game changer for me. Oh, by the way, I'd like to recommend that documentary, The Game Changers, for any of our guys who would like to know more about how lifestyle changes can make a difference. But that got me started on realizing that I didn't have to remain a helpless victim. I was not a victim of my genes. I was not a victim of my parents. I was not a victim of my culture. I could actually make informed medical decisions, lifestyle decisions that could make a difference in my life. Now, the information we share on doctor's orders, which started, oh, nearly 10 years ago, Ruthie, um, we, we share information with you. This is not to replace a conversation with your physician. We encourage you to take the information, take notes, get the recording, and have a dialogue with your medical professionals. Because one of the things that we know is many of them have not heard the information that you're hearing on the doctor's orders presentations. So have a dialogue with your medical professionals. They know you very well, and they have access to tests, to science, to um, medical research that they can themselves investigate so that they can support you as you practice informed medical decision making. Well, this evening, someone asked me a question, and if you have questions, once again, put a Q in the chat. And if you have a short version of your question, you can put it in the chat. So Ruthie and Charlotte can capture that for me, and we can try to answer those questions. But the question that was posed to me was, what about microplastics? And I thought, microplastics? What's that? So apparently, as plastics were developed and with the oil boom, the use of oil as a source of energy, one of the things that developed was the use of plastics. And plastics became very, very prevalent. Before the oil boom, we didn't really have plastics. I remember the first time I drove home in a taxi with plastic shopping bags. You see, I'm old enough to remember when we only had paper or fabric shopping bags. Those are the only options that we had. So I was driving in this taxi, and we had the windows down because it was very, very hot in the Caribbean, and the plastic bags were making so much noise. Everybody was so upset because of the noise of the wind blowing in the plastic bags. And that's one of my earliest memories of using plastics as part of our daily lives. Well, now there are plastics everywhere we turn. The computer, it's not made of only metal. In fact, the parts that look metal are really made of some kind of synthetic material that's associated with plastics. So I went looking for information, and one of my go tos, one of my mentors is Dr. Neil Barnard, and he has a podcast called The Exam Room, where he and Chuck Carroll, the weight loss champion, talk about topics. So I thought I'd share just a couple of points. He and Dr. Hannah um, Kaliova spoke about microplastics, and the important thing that I think you want to know is where do we get exposed to microplastics? Are they really an issue? And if they are, what can we do to avoid them? So, um, researchers found in New Mexico found after doing several autopsies that there may be as much as the amount of plastic that it takes to make a plastic spoon in the brain of people who had died. Now, of course, that's Mexico, and we're in the United States. However, they found that persons who had um, Alzheimer's, who had died of Alzheimer's, had a higher level of microplastics in their brain. So what are these microplastics? She says there's several different ones, but polyethylene, which is often used in food containers, um, polypropylene, and polyvinyl chloride. Those were the ones that were at the top of the list of the microplastics. And she gave a picture of some tiny specks of plastic that they had actually pulled out of the water. So there are microplastics in the sea. There are microplastics. They went even to Alaska and tested bodies of water in Alaska and found microplastics in the rivers and lakes and in the oceans around Alaska. So they found that microplastics are in our environment and we are getting more and more exposed to them. So, um, one of the other research processes that they did was there are arteries that lead to the brain called carotid artery. And sometimes those arteries, like other arteries in the body, develop plaques. And those plaques reduce the size of the artery and therefore reduce the blood flow to the brain. So there's a procedure called an endarterectomy, and they removed the plaque from the artery, and they tested these arteries from about 304 patients whom they followed over 3 or 4 years, and they found that half of them had microplastics in those plaques. So microplastics are in our environment. We can find them in the water, we can find them in the bodies of water, but we can apparently they're getting into our bodies. And so they're asking, well, how do we get them into our bodies? And she talked about two significant ways. Number one, they might actually be in highly processed foods. And they could also be in the packaging of these highly processed foods. So stay tuned. There might be more research available on whether highly processed foods contain microplastics, but we know that the wrapping in which we get our highly processed foods, they contain microplastics. And she says that many of the foods that we eat, if we heat if the plastic containers in which they come, if they're exposed to hot food, then the microplastics leach out of the containers and get into the food. So, because you may be asking, well, how am I getting exposed to microplastics? You may be getting exposed to them through the highly processed foods. You also may be getting exposed to them in these containers that contain our food, especially if the food is hot. So if you microwave food in plastics, then you can expose yourself to these microplastics because the hot food causes, or the heat causes the plastics to leach out of the food. One of the sources that people have asked um, the doctor about was, well, what about fish and seafood? So the researchers actually did some work to find out, do fish and seafood have microplastics? And what the researchers found, I already told you that they researched the water around Alaska and in the lakes and rivers, and they found microplastics there. But they also found in clams and other seafood levels of microplastic per 100 grams. So if you think of 100 grams as a portion of the seafood, there could be 90 particles of microplastic in the clams. But in the fish that they tested, and of course, this is an average, they tested different types of fish, they found as many as 240 milligrams of microplastic in 100 grams of fish. So the question is that possible? That, are we going to find the same level of microplastics in farm-raised fish? I don't have an answer for that, so stay tuned. If you want to avoid, her first recommendation, if you want to avoid exposure to microplastics, stop eating seafood and fish. Now, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just sharing with you what Dr. Kalyover was able to share, the research that she was exposed to. Now, the microplastics are in the air, they're in the water, they're in the soil. So, what about fruits and vegetables? Well, it turns out that microplastics can be found in fruits and vegetables. But where we talked about 90 particles of microplastics per 100 gram of seafood, you might find 1 to 3 microplastics per 100 gram of vegetables. So you want to make sure that you wash your vegetables well, that you get them from the best sources. But vegetables basically have um, less than 30 times less microplastics than the animal products. Now, if you are eating fruits and vegetables that are wrapped in plastic, again, you want to remove those wrappings. You want to try to minimize the contamination, and you want to wash them very well. Her second recommendation, of course, was do not heat your food, or don't expose hot food to the plastic containers. Especially she spoke especially about the black plastic containers. And don't microwave your food in plastic containers. Now, I know about 5 years ago, there was a lot of talk about that, and the talk seems to have died down. But this was a question that I was asked, so I wanted to bring it up, that there is now enough data to indicate that heating foods in plastic can increase the amount of exposure to microplastics. What about drinks? So you think maybe getting drinks in paper cups, but a lot of the cups are lined with plastic because, of course, paper is water soluble. If you leave paper exposed to water, the water will leach through. So a lot of cups are lined with plastic, and a lot of hot drinks are prepared in these plastic lined cups. So that's another potential source of microplastic exposure. And what about cold drinks? Well, a lot of canned drinks are also, the cans are also lined in plastic. And if they are kept in a cool environment, according to the doctor, you'd have a lower exposure to the microplastics. But we don't know where those cans have been. We don't know if they were held on a dock somewhere or out in the backyard, in the parking lot of our favorite grocery store during the heat wave, and whether or not they were exposed to high temperatures. That's another way that microplastics can leach into bottled water or bottled drinks or even canned drinks. So her recommendation is to avoid these canned drinks unless they're cold, and avoid drinking out of plastic containers. Now, if you have plastic containers with water and they're kept cold, then she says there's a lower exposure to microplastics. So she recommends stainless steel or glass. Now, you know that I bought a whole series of glass bottles, and all of them jumped out of their car. Not all at the same time, jumped out of my car and crashed on the ground. So with glass, you have to be careful. You may need to wrap it. You may need to get a special holder to protect it. And the final recommendation was to look at our clothing. And that was a surprise to me. And she said that when we go and we work out and we're all sweaty, hot and sweaty in synthetic clothing, polyester, nylon, and acrylics, that could be another potential exposure to microplastics. Now, what can we do about it? Of course, we could take her suggestions and avoid all the things that she recommended. One of the other things that she said that could give us hope is to increase the amount of plants that we eat. fruits, vegetables, especially the berries, the dark red and purple berries, because the anthocyanins have been found to block the microplastic attachment to our cells. And they were specifically referring to reproductive cells. So, good news. One of the things I want to remind you of is that we don't want to major on the minor. Microplastics are real, they can be a real problem, but the causes of death in the American population are not 100%, are not very high due to just microplastics. It's definitely something to think about. But you know, if you've been on this session with me before, that I've been sharing the 6 pillars of health. Now, if you remember what they are, you can put them in the chat. So um, use your focus and your energy to focus on the majors. You see, one of the things that we know, and someone asked me a question. Um, People talk about fiber all the time. Where we're going to get the enzymes to break down the fiber because our bodies don't break down fiber. Well, the enzymes are in the gut bacteria, and our liver has enzymes that help break down some of the particles of the fiber, and the nutrients that are needed to help that process, they come from fruits and vegetables. So whatever you do, whether or not you can swap out all your plastic containers for glass, that might not be practical right now. But what you can do right away is start making and applying the 6 pillars of health. Oh, somebody put it in the chat. Thank you. Water, walking, sleep, de-stressing, detoxing your environment, and eating whole food, plant-based. And what I'm so excited is because we can help you with all of those. Everyone here on this call and the person who invited you would be happy to do a 3-way call with you or a one-on-one where we walk through how we can begin to make the changes of adding more water, of walking more, of de stressing, of sleeping better, of removing some of the toxins that are in our home, or swapping out some of our containers. Maybe you just need one glass bottle or one stainless steel cup. You don't have to swap out everything all at once. But we can help you make those changes, and we can help you add more fruits and vegetables to your eating plan. Of course, you've heard about our Juice Plus capsules, and you've heard us talk about the 10 fruit, 10 vegetables, and the 10 berries. This is where you can start adding more fruits and vegetables to your eating plan. This can help your body in the healing process. And if you already know that you want to get more omegas, well, don't take it from fish, because along with the fish, you're getting the toxins that have been concentrated, which we now know may also include microplastics. We have a plant-based omega where you can get omega-3, 5, 6, 7, and 9 from 6 plant sources. You see, fish don't even make omega. And now you have access to the chewables and, of course, our superfood. You can get started on adding more fruits and vegetables to your eating plan, and that will help your body protect it against whatever microplastics are already there and minimize the amount of microplastic that and the impact that that can have going forward. So the more fruits and vegetables that you eat, the better that will be. So I hope that this has been helpful for you, the recommendations of Dr. Kaliova, and also being able to add more fruits and vegetables with the Juice Plus. The person who invited you would be happy to get you signed up on your first order of Juice Plus. And if you have a young person, ages 4 through 24, you can support them by including them in our Healthy Starts for Families. We try to help you by supporting them. You don't have to pay extra for them to get the fruit and the vegetables. And as long as you are part of the family of making healthy life decisions, that your kids can get that. And you have an image of the superfood packets that you can just put in water. You can just put them in water, shake it up, and you have the 2 capsules of fruit, vegetables, and berries, and a way to get more water as well as more nutrients. Okay, so I hope that information has been helpful. Now, time for questions. Are there any questions in the chat? Any questions about what I shared today about the microplastics, or if you had other questions that you wanted to have answered?
Uh,
Okay.
I think I think you did an excellent job explaining the microplastics and how we can get them out of our body, eating more plant-based, plant-strong food. I had a question about the blood type diet because it seems to have resurfaced again. Um, are they doing something different with it to, because I've heard someone say that their doctor wants them to do the blood type diet. So,
Yes. The most recent information that I have is that no, it's not really any different. Um, the original doctor did discover or they'll find that it seems as though there are places on your DNA that respond to different nutrients in food. And then he built an elaborate system around that information. Unfortunately, at the time when he developed that theory, there wasn't sufficient science to support it. So it was a great idea that the food can impact the genes. Now, 20 or 30 years along, we have a new science called epigenetics, where we have data indicating that yes, the food that you eat can switch on or switch off genes. Unfortunately, all of this new information doesn't support the framework that Dr. Diamato developed for the blood type diet. In fact, what the research shows is that the one eating plan that can reduce the risk, slow the progress of, and even reverse the 15 most common causes of death, whole food, plant strong eating. So, you're going to hear a lot of information about different types of diets, and some of them may seem to have great effect in a very short time. But remember, whenever you start making changes, if you start if you stop eating ultra processed foods, if you stop eating junk foods, if you stop eating drinking lots of sweetened beverages, if you start sleeping more, walking more, breathing more, guess what? You will improve. So even if the eating plan you've adopted doesn't have all the nutrients or has too much of some nutrients that research shows aren't good for you, the fact that you've cut out so many things that weren't healthy for you, you will actually see improvement. I hope that helps.
It does help. It's just it seems like things like to cycle back around. Let's
Yes,
try this again and see what happens. And like you said, it's like any diet other than whole food plant strong. It seems, yes, you get these fabulous results, but over the long term, it doesn't hold.
no,
The results don't hold.
yeah, yeah. So, and now we have enough data to explain some of the biochemistry of why you can eat a certain way for 3 weeks and actually see weight loss. You might even see changes in your metabolic numbers. And it's because you may have eliminated some of the things that were creating the inflammation that led to your bad numbers. And but over time, if you're eating something other than a whole food plant-based diet, then your outcomes eventually don't support our expectations. This is the only eating plan that has nearly 100 years of research behind it.
Thank you.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
Anyone else have a question?
Let's give it up for Ruthie. Yay, great questions.
Okay. Let me see.
Are there any questions in the chat? Can anybody scroll back and see
I
if there are
am,
any?
I do not, I
No
don't see
questions in
any.
the chat? Okay.
No, I put my question in, but you answered it.
Uh-huh. Great.
Okay.
Um, Let me see. I had another question. Okay. So two quick questions, hopefully two quick answers. I mentioned during the presentation about fiber, and I'll try to give a more clear answer about fiber. Sometimes we hear about components of plants as if they are separate from the plant. Complex carbohydrates equals fiber. They are long chains of actually sugar molecules, like a bracelet with sugar molecules. Sometimes they have the same sugar, sometimes they have different sugars attached to each other. But what makes a complex carbohydrate more interesting is that they are branched. So it's like they have branches, and our digestive tract does not have enzymes to go past the branches. So we could digest the ends, but we can't go past the branches. But the gut bacteria, they have enzymes that can break down the fiber branches. And so think of it like a big ball of of um, of stainless steel. Have you ever seen those stainless steel balls? They're all clumped up together, and we can digest just the outside. The gut bacteria can digest even more of it, but they don't digest all of it. But what they do digest gives us access to compounds like short chain fatty acids and longer, shorter chain carbohydrates that are very beneficial to the lining of the gut itself. And then when they're broken down, they also provide nutrients for us to use in our liver to provide nutrition for us. So fiber, which is found in fruits, vegetables, grains, peas, and beans, complex carbohydrates, whatever you want to call it. The complex carbohydrate is another name for fiber. It's found in plants. It's not found in animal products. It is very healthy for us. It breaks down to provide energy. It breaks down to nourish the bacteria. The bacteria, in turn, produce products that nourish us and are also part of our immune system. And also, the fiber, the undigested fiber, can absorb chemicals that are passed out of our liver through the gallbladder into our digestive system, like excess hormones, like estrogen, testosterone, progesterone. I don't know if progesterone is one of them, but cholesterol. Excess, those excess compounds are passed into the gut and the fiber attaches to it and it can be passed out of our system. If we don't have enough fiber, those substances are reabsorbed. And so if you have high cholesterol, your body is making cholesterol, but you need fiber to get rid of the excess cholesterol that your body's trying to get rid of. And if you eat more fiber, more fruits and vegetables, you have less room for the cholesterol bearing foods, which would be the animal products. Any questions about fiber? And then one last question, one last comment. Highly processed foods. Now, there are highly processed foods that are not good for us, and there are highly processed foods that are good for us. So, one of the highly processed foods, for an example, that's really good is tofu. It's from a bean, but it's highly processed and it has been used for hundreds of years and it's a very good source of plant proteins. Some highly processed foods that are not good for us. Don't shoot the messenger. Sausages and pepperoni and bacon and hot dogs and beef burgers, highly processed. But not only are they highly processed, just the fact that they're highly processed is not the problem. They're highly processed and they contain large amounts of saturated fats. They also contain large amounts of other chemicals that are not healthy for us. They contain large amounts of hormones that are not healthy for us. And they have additives like salt and sugar and other compounds that make us want to eat more and more of them. So they're not good for us based on the content. They're also not good for us because they have additives that are also trying to make us eat more of it. And then when you place them on a grill, exposing these compounds to high heat, these highly processed animal products to high heat, produces carcinogenic compounds. So these highly processed animal products, we want to minimize them or eliminate them from your eating plan. All right, that's it for me today. Any final questions?
Doesn't look like we have any final questions.
Okay. Well, either this week or next week, I'll be doing Ask the Coach. So if you come up with any more questions, just email me or text me, and I'll be happy to include them in my Ask the Coach podcast. Yay. Well, this is Coach Carla Joy saying thank you so much, all of you, for joining me this evening. I'm so glad that we had this time to talk. And I want to remind you, major on the majors. Focus on the 6 pillars of health, the big lifestyle changes, and we can help you make the other changes as well. I look forward to seeing you again. And don't forget what my friends say every time we're together.
Eat more
More fruits
fruits
and
and
vegetables.
vegetables.
That's right. See you next time.